So this session is organized in cooperation with the German Sakharov Society. And I will first give the floor to Mikhail Minakov, philosopher, who will start our discussion about whether a sustainable peace with Russia is possible.
Well,
the subject of my speech goes beyond the peace with Russia. What is more important is whether a long-lasting peace in Eastern Europe and in Northern Eurasia is at all possible. And it's a bigger problem. Indeed, the peace in Eastern Europe is not possible without justice for Ukraine. It can't even be discussed. But our conference today started with a speech by Kirill Rogov, where he insisted that we should think about long-term processes and new political structures. I totally agree with him, but our forecast will go even further. So in my report, I will use two kinds of arguments, normative arguments and historical ones. So I will continue what Immanuel Kant started some centuries ago. Why am I starting with Kant? Well, first of all, because of the timing. This year was the 300th anniversary of Immanuel Kant, who was a member of Berlin Academy of Sciences. And we are in Berlin this year, so we can't but mention Kant. And neo-Kantian philosophers in the 19th century did everything so that Kant remains a German, a Central European philosopher. But if you read Kant's biographers, people who knew him personally, who had personal conversations with him, you know that he was very preoccupied with the Eastern Europe. So I would call Kant a very important Eastern European philosopher, not only a Central European, but at the same time an Eastern European philosopher who is important for understanding of a long-lasting political progress in Eastern Europe. In his works, Kant summarizes the Enlightenment age of Europe in his book on eternal peace, very ironic title, which is a reference to Leibniz. In the beginning of the 18th century, in Codex Diplomaticus, Leibniz makes a joke. So, a road to the internal peace is a road to a cemetery. But this road is possible. Enlightenment is the project to make a lasting peace possible in Europe. And Kant and Enlightenment philosophers say that war is a natural state. So the antagonism of war, which is not natural, is peace. Peace is something that should be constructed. It requires some efforts. And in the Eastern Europe, Kant's ideas are perceived in a very peculiar way. 20 years after the publication of Kant's book on eternal peace, Griboyedov, Russian writer, who lives in the Northern Caucasus and takes part in wars there, he makes a note about the war in the north of Caucasus, like a war between Enlightenment and wild state of people in the mountains. So Enlightenment is something that brings us limitations, chains, and freedom is something that is associated with antiquity, with natural state, a long-lasting peace in the Eastern Europe. It's associated either with the emperors or with the Soviet era. It means that it involves minimum rights and minimum freedoms. So post-Soviet history is important for us because for the first time we have a possibility, for the first time in history, for the Eastern Europe to build freedom policies, freedom nations, with market economy, and to build peace on this vast space by joining the big Europe project. And the fact that we have war in this space means that we didn't make use of this unique opportunity which we had after the fall of the Soviet Union. And of course, we can acknowledge this failure, but what is more important is to take lessons out of it. So, by expanding on Kant's ideas from his book on the eternal peace, by joining them with lessons we take from the modern history, I would like to propose what we could do in future. First, well, we mentioned republicanism in the previous two sessions. Republican project in the post-Soviet time was contested by neo-imperialism and neo-nationalism. In the beginning of the 90s, some of the colleagues said that, well, nation was a foundation for democracy, and indeed, at the beginning of the 90s, a part of the transition idea was that democracy and market should be based on something, and the space could be new nations. So national democratic movements like our Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Georgian experience learns us, shows that, well, national state could become a foundation for democracy. But then
национальные республики, и таким образом не только неоимпериализм вот в виде военного путинизма,
like military Putinism and new nationalisms, ethno-nationalism undermine states from within. Like Anton Chekhov wrote in his books, it's a black tango, but it takes two to tango. It's a tango of imperialists and nationalists. And the republic is destroyed in this dance. A republic that could become a foundation for freedoms, that could protect the interests of different minorities, and that could preserve peace by including in the republican structure European norms, like the Council of Europe. Because we need to have some foundation for peace in big Europe. So the Republic was destroyed, and Kant affirms that for peace, strong republics should be created, where the law puts limits on the majority and where professional armies are forbidden. Well, I think we need a form of we need to forbid professional armies in future, like state armies and private military companies. As I said, Kant makes a reference to Leibniz, to Codex Diplomaticus. It was a book that promoted a long-lasting peace, how to limit damage from wars among diplomats, among those who were involved in international affairs. And if we read Kant attentively, we see that he addresses his book to policymakers and to generals. And it's much more difficult for him. At the end, he tries to seduce his target audience. He makes a comparison with devil. He says, yes, we understand you, we understand your position, because you marched on the corpses, but even devils can create republics. You shouldn't be morally perfect for this. It was an important thesis for Kant, for his peace project. So he suggests some ways, quite logical ways, that could lead us to a conclusion that some structures need to be created. We need an international structure to support peace. Well, he didn't develop his ideas further. It was difficult for him because we have experience of living in a world where we have the United Nations and the Council of Europe, but it's not enough. Probably our big mistake in the 90s was the lack of a big diplomatic conference to create some common rules in the Eastern Europe and in the Central Eurasia. OSCE is minimalistic. Council of Europe is romantic. It didn't work. So, as I see it, after a very long war, I think that even if the conflict is frozen, it won't give us a long-lasting peace. So probably this cycle of wars, of reproducing wars in the Eastern Europe will last a long time, and more countries will be involved in this process. But when in some very distant future we have this possibility, we need to understand the main things that are needed for peace: strong republics and investment into infrastructure to support international peace. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mikhail. If someone wants to applaud, please. It was a brilliant speech, and I'm passing the floor to European Parliament MP Sergey Lagodinsky, so that he could initiate discussion with Mikhail. Thank you very much. Yes, with Mikhail and with Kant.
Да, но меня попросили как бы ответить на два вопроса.
I was asked to answer two questions, cornerstone questions for the present time and for the future. Whether peace, European peace with Russia is possible. That was the first question, and all the consequences. Whether we can prolong the Cold War with Russia if we don't have a wonderful Russia all of us want to have. Well, I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not a researcher. So, from my point of view, from the political point of view, everything is possible, but everything depends on what was mentioned by different people, including by Kant, whether we will have in the Russia of the future some respect for the freedom and for the freedom of others, for the freedom of our neighbors, whether we will be able to overcome different barriers, the barrier of imperial spirit, the barrier of totalitarianism. And we are discussing it every time when we are meeting representatives of so-called opposition, or what I like to call them representatives of free Russian society. who are mainly outside Russia? Well, I believe it's a key question to understand whether peace with this wonderful Russia of the future could be possible. Because Russia should be wonderful not only for those who are inside this country, but for those who are its neighbors. There is a well-known theory in international relations that, well, democracies don't wage wars with one another. That if we have democracy in Russia, if Russia is liberalized, automatically it will, well, improve the situation. Well, it's an interesting topic for those who are involved in scientific research, because it will be very interesting for any discussions between representatives of Russia and of Ukraine, of their respective civil societies. Because I believe that a lot of representatives of Russian civil society, free media, think about this automatic nature of democratization. They are fighting for democracy. They are fighting against Putin, and they believe that automatically they are fighting for a peaceful Russia. And, well, others are not so sure. Well, I don't understand why, because I don't know about a historical period where Russia was fully democratic and aggressive. Well, maybe Russia used to be democratic for a very short time, and that explains it all. From my point of view, that is the key message if we want to believe in the wonderful Russia of the future. Well, today in the morning in the parliament, we had a short meeting with Andreas, and yes, indeed, very few people believe in Russia, in democratic society.
So very few people. Maybe just 1, 2, 3. There is no trust. There is no trust. I don't want to offend anyone. I love all of you. But it's quite interesting if I speak with representatives of the Baltic political circles. They react really sharply. We could not forgive the statement of Yashin, whom I love too, and the statement of Kara-Murza after his liberation. Let us not misunderstand each other. I'm trying to explain, but this mistrust, it is there, and this mistrust is related with exactly that there is no correlation for people between the democratic agenda, anti-Putin agenda, and anti-empire agenda. I'm not sure that there is empirically that this correlation does not exist, but there is no such understanding. If we would speak about any academic questions, it would be interesting to see how much is this automatism in place or not. And the second part of the question was, what will happen if there will be no such nice Russia? We'll get another Cold War or maybe hot war. If Europe is prepared for that, I think Europe is not prepared. Now we're leaving the academic area. Now we're talking about practical things. I think that we're not prepared in Europe for this. And first of all, it has to do with a kind of a mismatch. There are resources in the Western Europe, but there is no understanding what it means, this military confrontation. And in the Central and Eastern Europe, there is an understanding what it means, the confrontation, but they don't have the resources. We need to increase the understanding, to have the understanding in their countries which are maybe far away from Russia. They don't have the sense of urgency. They don't understand that the de-escalation cannot lead to any peaceful events. And I'm not sure that we will have enough spirit, energy for a long-term confrontation with the Russian Federation out of psychological motives. And all the other things result out of this if you don't prioritize the danger we are in, the urgency of this danger for many members of the EU, for many of us. Look at the airplanes which are falling on their way from Leipzig to Lithuania. If we are not able to make this mental transition, so then the articles of the NATO treaty are also in danger. What will happen if we have a kind of a hybrid, not understandable attack somewhere near Narva? It's not clear who was that, why, what, maybe on purpose or not. But it is happening now. Someone is flying over Sweden. Someone is flying to Romania, to Poland. It's happening. And if I were a strategic person from the Kremlin, this all occasional falling downs, I will do it even more often and maybe more narrow, and just leaving it ambivalent, so just not knowing who was that. Okay, maybe it was from the Russian Federation, maybe it was an attack, but maybe not. And if we are not morally equipped in the western and central part of the European Union, in the center of the European Union, the western part and the southern part of the European Union, so the Article 5 of the NATO treaty will not be activated, because we will still speak about de-escalation. Something fell down, something exploded, but nothing happened. And this is maybe the limit of a threshold if I can rule out the whole Cold War with some steps into even the hot war. This is what I wanted to pay your attention to. Now my hot greetings from the cold Strasbourg, from the European Parliament. The temperature is really very low here. My greetings to you. You're in Berlin, as far as I understand. Yes, we are in Berlin. Thank you very much to Sergey Lagodinsky. I don't know if he can stay with us. So I have 4 minutes left. And then I have to leave. He was trying to lower our expectations at the very beginning because he said, I'm not a philosopher and I'm not that and this, but he underlined some very important things, how the Russian civil society is perceived from the point of view of the future peace, and what force stands the beginning of democratization. Maybe someone wants to react to his words, or maybe some reaction to Immanuel Kant or to as someone else. My name is Mikhail. I'm a PhD from the University from Berlin. I'm a representative of the academia. So the question of automatism between the democracy and the war is quite a difficult one. There are some researchers which say that the young democracies go for war often. Why? Because the nationalism plays a very big role. The young democracies, they don't have the border or the limit between the political and ethnical communities, and they don't match. And if they don't match, so that the young Democrats just go and kill, maybe some other reasons are also there. From this point of view, one can be skeptical about this connection between the peace and democratization of Russia. But there is still another question, maybe to Mikhail, first of all, about the nationalism and the future of Russia within the frames of the European and Eurasian security system. Other post-Soviet states, they built their nation states founded in their national identity, but for Russia it's quite difficult, because Russia was an empire. It was never a state of just Russians. And if it will be only the ethnically Russian state, it is scary. But if not, who will constitute this democratic community? Those who are occasionally on this territory, within the borders of 91, but this narrative is not quite effective one. It's not convincing even inside Russia. So the choice between the nationalism and multinational pluralism is quite a difficult one. How to find the third way between those two vices? There's no third way, but so we have to take this one. Sergey, can you answer in 1 minute? As far as I understood, it was just a comment to educate, nothing else. There is a thesis that the democracies don't fight each other. But this is an academic thesis. For me, it's a kind of a folklore. The First World War proved that democracies can make war one with each other, with bombs, with armies, and so on. Nevertheless, regarding the Democrats, not democracies, but the Democrats, the democratic forces, I don't see any aggression of an empire within them. That's why I say, let us deal with the de-imperialization of the Russian culture. Let us try to find it in the culture. But if we speak about the persons who we deal with, I don't see anyone it's a part of the political daily agenda. It's not a part of their daily political job. I mean, this empire thinking. Thank you very much for the invitation. I apologize that it was a short visit, but anytime you can contact me. Thank you, Sergey, that you joined us. So you can leave now.
Хорошо, давайте, берите микрофон, отвечайте, а мы тогда пойдем дальше по...
Take the mic and answer the questions.
Здесь как бы продолжение разговора с Сергеем.
As a continuation of the discussion and the conversation with Mikhail and Sergey. The first two sessions were focused on Russia. It's normal for this community. But I think that the peace in the eastern part and of Europe and in the northern part of Eurasia is only possible if we don't only focus on Russia, but we see it in everything in general. the Mikhail Nemtsov required or demanded for sine qua non. The defeat of Russia is necessary, but it's not enough for a stable peace, long-term peace. We have to prepare the political design. We have to be prepared. The search for constitutional projects, for the Russian immigration, the discussions in the Ukrainian communities, they have to search for constitutional design of the future for their countries. It is really important. I'm sorry that I'm touching Kant again. As he was writing his essay, there were two very scary events. It was in the middle of the 19th century. So they thought, if we just create only republics, there will be no aggression. And the monarchies, because they are constituted like in a hierarchic way, they're involving the big masses of people into wars. They are weaker than the republics. But as Kant writes his essay, the French Republic was aggressive. They annexed a part of Rhinelandia. So, and besides that, three monarchies just divided Poland between them. The Republic, so the Republic was weaker than the monarchy, and the Republic can be aggressive. That's why we need the new design of a republic. And after the post-Soviet time, we know even better which design we need. We have to consider the mistakes of the past. Without the nationalities, we cannot do it. But the republics have to be based on the rule of the law and not of any majorities. But if the nation is an imaginated community and the empire is an imaginated state, so those two principles will combat each other if the republics are dysfunctional, if they are weaker. It is really important that the imagination of the rule of law is strong. And just to finalize a very important argument, the international infrastructure, which will support the peace, is also important. Maybe some special committees, some maybe regional branches or subsidiaries of the International Court. Not only the defeat of Russia, but also the punishment of the guilty persons. It was really a theoretical point for Europe, all these Nuremberg court procedures. And if we have such a court proceeding after the end of the war with all the war criminals, it would be a really strong argument and method to normalize the situation in the Eastern Europe. Thank you. I remember that there was a hand over there. I don't promise that everyone can ask their questions. Oleg Zhuravlev, I have two questions to Mikhail. The first one, about the reasons of your explanation. As if we have the chance for a republic, it is more difficult to construct a long-term peace. And then you say, okay, we didn't manage, there was no conference, we could not build the republic. What are the reasons why you didn't manage it? You cannot just say, we just didn't manage to do this. The Soviet Union just fell apart. The democracy was depended too strong from national movements. The capitalism was wrong. Are there any more concrete reasons why the people didn't manage to do this and they didn't organize the conference? And the second empirical question, maybe you can name some steps of the neoliberalism in some post-Soviet or post-Eastern European state, which were the main ones for the escalation of today.
Извините, я буду сразу отвечать. Память
So I
уже
will
не...
answer immediately. Oleg, thank you very much. The reasons of the failure, I tried to answer the questions in my book, which was published in different languages. The reason the book's title is The Post-Soviet Man. One of the reasons is the not preparedness of the post-Soviet people to construct the new reality, because this happened suddenly, out of reflexes. It will be the same in the future, but if we are ready for that, prepared for that, or the next generation will be prepared for that, will be more pragmatic one.
Для меня
примером остается, вот когда сравнивать. A good example for me, if we compare the French Revolution with the American Revolution, we see how the preparedness of the leaders to build the republic changes the game. And this not being prepared was one of the reasons. I don't think that the reason was the social process. And the second question, please, the same, take my book and you can find it there, but maybe the wave of the 90s, of the end of the 90s, there was an attempt for a full transformation. So the 90s, they don't start with some shy democratization, but was a deep transformation of the economics, of the society, of the state. Everything is changing. The legislation is changing. By the end of the 90s, it was clear then something was changed and something was not changed. And then now we take a look at the theory of democratization, but this toxic pair of nationalism and imperialism, they get a new breath after the wave of any revolutions, as all the post-Soviet countries just can be reactionary ones or revolutionary ones.
And it was a trigger for all the wars with Georgia and in Donbass. Well, now I propose to give the floor to our next speaker, Andreas Umland, if he can hear us. So I propose for him to take the floor, and then we will continue our discussion. Yes, I can hear you, and I hope you can hear me as well. Thank you very much. Well, I see that we have a very interesting geographical representation, Berlin, Strasbourg, and I am speaking from Kyiv. The title of this session, Sustainable Peace, and well, it is related to the situation inside Russia. Well, I believe that this situation inside will be determined by the situation outside. Like in the past, internal reforms were the result of some external losses, revolutions. Well, the first revolution, that was a result of a lost First World War. Then the Cold War was lost, as well as the war in Afghanistan. So the lasting peace, for me, is a result of some external events. We can analyze the situation in Germany after war. Anti-fascists in Germany, they had no role to play in the downfall of the German fascism. This regime was destroyed by the external factors. Well, I'm speaking from Kyiv. As far as you know, the Ukrainians are very skeptical towards democratization in Russia because, well, they doubt that if there are different parties in Russia, well, the party of freedom and the party of imperialistic ideas, well, they are afraid that the Russians vote for the imperialist party. So I think internal developments in Russia are quite ambivalent. It's not clear what will follow, whether there will be some internal events in Russia. What will it mean? So it's about the possibility for Ukraine to restore its borders, maybe not and to achieve just peace. The Russia has to lose, at least partially, the newly gained territories. So the chances for peace, it's a question for the military. It's a security question. It's a question directly related to military alliances, military industry, guarantees, treaties. It's not a question of internal developments inside Russia. And of course, there are quite a few unknown factors in any analysis. It's the situation on the front line, it's the economic situation, it's the internal situation in Ukraine, events in the USA, German elections, different developments in Europe, known unknowns, and a lot of known unknowns, some known things, known variables that we know nothing about, that we don't know how they will be developed. Well, it's called degree of freedom in the statistics. We have too many variables with unknown values, so we can't say anything specific about possible development of this war. So I would like to focus my attention on one issue where we have a known. We have a variable which we know. It's the character of this war, which becomes known in comparison on the background of the international system. I think the character of this war will determine the future of international support for Ukraine. Well, it comes in waves, of course. It is not comprehensive, but given the character of this war, it will be a long-term support and it won't diminish. Why? Because I believe it's a unique war. And please, could you show my presentation? I think this war is unique because of, please, next slide. This war is unique because of 5 different factors which make it unique. Well, they appeared after the Second World War. Well, this war is unique among all wars after 1945. But I will say a few more words about why this war is unique by the end of my presentation. Well, I won't read the text of my slides. All of you know it. So it's a combination of 5 factors. So the peacefulness of Ukraine before 2014, Ukraine wasn't involved in any war. It was a peaceful country inside and outside. The second one, territorial annexations by Russia. It's not mere occupation, it's pure annexation. The third factor, signs of genocide, which we see in the decisions of the International Criminal Court about deportation of Ukrainian children. Four, UN is making use of its UN Security Council membership to diplomatically block all decisions about this war. And number 5, it's a subversion of the logic of non-proliferation treaty.
Через договор о нераспространении ядерного оружия,
the logic of the document,
и который России служит для проведения этой войны, поскольку она не только имеет
makes use of it in this war, because not only Russia has nuclear weapon, well, Russia is allowed to have nuclear weapons according to this non-proliferation treaty, and Ukraine, well, is forbidden from having any nuclear weapons, and it doesn't have any. So, taking apart, no one of those 5 characteristics is unique, but its combination makes this war a unique phenomenon after the end of the Second World War. And that's why this war is really subversive for the international system after 1945. On this background, in my opinion, we should be cautiously optimistic, because this war, well, all those characteristics will define further support of Ukraine by Western countries and maybe by other countries as well, because all those characteristics taken together are very subversive.
У меня там на слайдах еще изложено каждый из этих пунктов. Я думаю, может быть, это тут не надо, я могу...
Well, I have some more ideas about every one of those 5 points. I won't do it right now in order to not to take time. So in conclusion, I can say that this war is unique in modern history. Well, of course, we used to have in the past more terrible wars, well, before 1945, but Nazi Germany didn't have Security Council membership. Hitler didn't have the possibility to make use of the international law to block all the decisions against its regime diplomatically. And Nazi Germany didn't have any non-proliferation treaty.
Снова же свои экспансионистские войны. И в этом смысле, в том, что тут
как бы expansionist wars. So I think international law in this case is one of the factors enabling expansionist war. Well, it's quite a paradox, of course. And maybe it's what makes this war unique.
В конечном счете интерпретировать, что есть все-таки шанс на конечное достижение постоянного мира, потому что сама эта война имеет
to achieve long-lasting peace.
Ну, возвращение этих территорий и тоже
So the
создание
return of all those territories,
восстановление территориальной целостности Украины, это
territorial
не только
integrity of Ukraine, it's not only in the interest of Europe, of the West, it's also in the interest of everyone, of all the actors who understand the importance of international order. Otherwise, if this war was an example for other countries wishing to expand their territories, it would undermine the UN system, the non-proliferation system, etc. Well, maybe I will stop here. And of course, if you have any questions about those 5 characteristics that I enumerated, I will be happy to answer. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andreas. So I see hands raised. I pass the floor to Lagodinsky because, well, there is a gender disbalance here. I'm trying to correct it. Thank you very much. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I have a question to Mikhail and to you. What is wrong with the international law and with the international security system that they are being weaponized by the aggressor and that they are being manipulated so that they protect the aggressor in this violent, aggressive war? We can't put all the blame on Russia. I am a sociologist in law, but the legal system is manipulated, so something is intrinsically wrong with the system and with the enforcement system. Well, I mean, with the organizations and the institutions that are implementing this law. Thank you. Andreas, well, I believe you should be the first to reply, because it was your topic. It's a philosophical question, so maybe Mikhail can answer it better than I. I think it's a sequence of unfortunate events. The Russian Federation, after the fall of the Soviet Union, was admitted to the UN and automatically got a place in the UN Security Council. As far as I know, in the UN Charter, there is no mention of Russian Federation. The Soviet Union is mentioned there, and in the agreement that put an end to the Soviet Union, it was not Russia that inherited the Soviet legacy, but the Commonwealth of Independent States. But it's a paradox, but this seat in the Security Council was awarded to Russia, not to the Commonwealth of Independent States. And there is no world government, no world parliament who could be blamed for any misdoings. And the wrongdoer, perpetrator, has the biggest nuclear warhead arsenal. Russia has more warheads, nuclear warheads, than the United States. And it determines everything else. All the other issues are subordinate in this regard. Could we have done it in any other way? Well, I don't know. Well, maybe. In the 90s, we could have been more attentive to this possibility of imperialistic revanche.
России в ООН, скажем, в отличие от Сербии. Сербия
the seat in the Security Council. Well, it's unlike Russia, Serbia was admitted to the UN according to a usual procedure. Although Serbia inherited the Yugoslavian legacy, Russia was also a part of the G7, became a part of the Council of Europe, despite the fact that it was not ready.
Специфический Совет НАТО, Россия, это все придавало
NATO, Russia Council,
Москве и Кремлю и российской элите идею о том, что Россия что-то особенное, да, и
suggested to Kremlin and to Russian elite that Russia was a unique and special country. So all the Russian claims to Ukraine, to Moldova, to other countries that are based on this presumption that Russia is unique, Russia has its rights and can implement them. So, if you are looking for the culprit, if you are looking for those who are culpable of this, well, we, the West, are to be blamed for it. In the beginning of the 90s, we made this impression on the Russian elite so that, well, Russia is something special. Russia doesn't have to follow the rules. Russia is outside of common rules, so it became a member of the UN, of the Council of Europe, of the G7. So Russia is going on with this policy. Thank you, Andreas. Maybe Kant has replied to this question. Well, Kant doesn't. Well, but yes, we can get inspired by his idea of world federation. But what is important for international law? Well, it's different exemptions. And, well, on one side, we have international law after the Second World War, which is a dialectical system to sovereignties, personal sovereignty and governmental sovereignty, and they are balancing, they are... And if someone is exceptional, the sovereignty is undermined. So, those political systems undermine the international law, so there should be no exemption for anyone.
Nevertheless, if, as the UN was created, we know the history of its foundation, there were treaties between the big countries. This is a category of big countries, middle-sized and small countries. Also, their center and the periphery is another disbalance. So every time we make a step forward, this moderate optimism is confirmed, but still, every time we have some internal contradictions. And Andreas mentioned a very important factor, the presence of the nuclear weapon. This is one of the reasons which impacts the design of a republic. For Russia, isn't more a dam and not a resource. A lot of nuclear weapons, a kind of a curse. Deputinization means denuclearization. Why it is a curse? If you have so many nuclear weapons, so how can you become a republic? You cannot be equal to the others. The next question. So behind you, over there. Thank you very much. I just would like to comment what Andreas said and a question to Mikhail. Okay, Russia is a big country. There is a small Azerbaijan, a big friend of the European Union. 2023, the International Court of the UN makes a decision, and Azerbaijan just ignores that decision, and there was a climate summit in Baku. So UN shows that the decisions made by them can be ignored. It doesn't impact any relationship between UN and the state. It's not a big Russia, it's just a very small regional dictatorship. So the question to me, Mikhail, is you name all the Kant's science characteristics. Kant wrote that there is a system, and within a system there are some statements. So the main law is the law of common hospitality, and you just forget it. So you think that the Federation of Republics will be federations of close states, or we have to enter this law. What to do with it? Now it seems not to work. If it is even not discussed, something like this, like a general hospitality, like an innovation in the international law. But if you don't have it, this whole system falls apart, and the republics are separated one from each other, and they need a lot of energy to hold the borders. About the Azerbaijan, it was not a question. No, just a comment. But I would like to answer still.
Можно еще шире сказать, что
I could say even widely, it is a so-called liberal international order which appeared 1945. It was never liberal, it was never international, it was never an order. There are a lot of such examples where there was a kind of injustice and not complying with the rules. I understand it. But talking about the Russian war, there is a kind of a coincidence of some specialities which make this war different than the Azerbaijan war, and with the Mountain Karabakh. It was a war against the annexion. Armenia itself didn't recognize it, but the Mountain Karabakh was a part of Armenia. It was another kind of the war. And Azerbaijan is not a member of the Security Council. It's not a nuclear power which uses the nuclear weapons to extend its territories. We may speak about if the behavior of Azerbaijan was a genocide or not, but it's quite a different context. This is the war of Azerbaijan against Armenia. It was not a war against the peaceful Armenia, it was a militant Armenia. And then it got kind of a reaction. It was a reaction. But Ukraine was never such a militant country. It was not even close to be militant. There were maybe some marginals in Ukraine who were thinking about the extending of the territory. There are some more of them even now, but before 2014, it was not part of the mainstream of the Ukrainian policy. There is no black and white. That is what I wanted to say. It's not that everything was white before 2014, now it's all black. No. But this combination of all these factors is a unique one. It doesn't mean that other wars or other violations of the international law are trivial ones. But what is happening since 2014 is a unique one.
Спасибо, Andreas.
Thank you, Andreas. What I would add, as I was talking about the new imperialism, I didn't mean only the Russian one. In the post-Soviet territory, there are even different ones, and Azerbaijan is one of the such example. Maybe they are less toxic, but so the case is that the international law is on the side of those who want to have its territory back, but through the deaths of the population, it's a contradiction. But hospitality, it's a very important thing. As I was talking about the human rights, I meant the continuation of this precondition, the development of this precondition. But the audience today, the current audience, they are here. What this why? Because the hospitality rules work, and Germany is an incorporation of anti-pragmatic rule of hospitality. All the migrants from all the refugees from Ukraine by the European countries, by the European Union is unprecedented. It makes even this war even more unique. So they support here not only the individual persons, but also the country itself. Yes, this element for the eternal peace, for the long-term peace, is very important, but I see it like an incorporation of the human rights. The next question, please.
Давайте, да. Ну, попробуйте, если действительно уточнение, не вопрос.
Mikhail, Kant имел в виду проксинию греческую.
Kant meant the Greek proxenia. Then it's not hospitality. Then this is an antique institution of their relatives connection. Now we're talking about the interpretation of Kant in that times, and now we get the new meaning for this hospitality meant by Kant. Mikhail, please. I agree with Andreas in theory, but I think that we discuss everything really theoretically about possible Nuremberg court proceeding, but we forget when the decision about Nuremberg was made, as it was clear that the Nazi Germany will fail, and there was a front line of 3 states which were combating the Germany, as Germany was already losing the war. But under the current circumstances, we see the opposite picture. So now is the question if the Ukraine can hold the left coast of the river, and where Trump and Putin can make an agreement about the occupied territories. There is no other military perspective in place. Only the optimists from the Ukrainian government see it in a different way. And it will be so. So the question is, the Russian opposition, which is attending this conference since 30 years, was ignoring the problem of the part of population of the state, what was a success of the Soviet Union, would not see themselves as citizens of the states which were built afterward. So the question of the state border, the question is why I live here now in an independent state. it was not solved, as the international law stated. It's not only about Ukraine and Russia, it's also about Georgia, Armenia, Central Asia, and so on, the same problems. But if we speak about the Russian opposition, it was ignoring 30 years long the fact of existence of the big communities in on the territories of the post-Soviet countries. We mentioned Narva, for example. It's in Estonia, and we have 70,000 Russian citizens living in Estonia, which is about 1/6 of the population of Estonia. They have the cultural orientation towards Russia, linguistic orientation towards Russia, and it is suppressed through the decisions of the state authorities. It's not only about Estonia, it's the same with Latvia, the same with the modern Ukraine, also before the war, the same picture. And there is a big Russian-speaking community not only in the Baltic countries, but also within the European Union. They have also the cultural orientation towards Russia. This is the orientation which is used by the official Russian authorities. He uses the term the Russian world. Millions of people who influence the internal Russian agenda. And under the modern circumstances, when the Russian opposition is abroad, they still ignore this problem, as the meeting in Berlin last week showed. So it is a very important question. This is a kind of a tango between the radical nationalism, which conquers the agendas of the post-Soviet states, and the Russian imperialistic nationalism, that the Russian-speaking people are oriented to those who are eager to listen to them. It has to be discussed. I will just correct you, maybe not. That one was presented before. She said about that problematics. It was mentioned. Being in Kyiv, I know all these problems which the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian state have at the front line in their foreign affairs. But with my speech, I wanted to state why it is worth to think that at some point the topic of this panel, or that there will have a long-term peace in spite of all these difficulties. So it doesn't matter if we speak about the internal affairs, external affairs at the front line. There are some global aspects of this war which go beyond the Eastern Europe, which go beyond Europe, beyond the Western countries, and touches the interests of all these countries. And at some point, maybe, I hope, I don't know, maybe it's in vain, but that the countries of the global South, maybe after we call it German, this Schadenfreude, that we're happy about the failure of another one. So if they pass this period of this being glad that the whites are combating each other,
На самом деле, это вот нарушение международного порядка.
This is the violation of the international order, of the international law,
нераспространение ядерного оружия,
the non-distribution of the nuclear weapons. This is a kind of a foundation of the international law.
Это на самом деле больше касается стран глобального юга, потому что
even more about the countries of the global south. We in Germany, we are part of the NATO, of the European Union.
Ядерным зонтиком пока что, по крайней
We
мере,
are under the nuclear umbrella of the US. Maybe it can be changed if Trump wants it. But it's not about us, all the security questions, it's not about us, it's less about us. All this international law, all the solidarity, all this, it's even more actual question for Asian countries, for the Latin America countries. And this is the speciality of this war, that it will lead, that the territorial integrity of Ukraine can be kept. Otherwise, the international order is violated. It's the end of international order, the order which appeared after 1945, and there will be other countries which want to follow the example of Russia, and the other countries will want not to be as naive as Ukraine was, and maybe they will acquire the weapons of weapons in order to keep their borders and their territories.
Mikhail,
do you want to say anything about situation, that the situation is not the same as in Yalta 1945? Now it's not the time to speak about the future Nuremberg. I think it is the time to speak about it. Even in the darkest historical times, just the hope that the world will be better in the future, it will support us. Now, the time for hope is always there. And the last question, Nikolai Petrov. I would like to continue what was said before, but generally. Today we have happily avoided to discuss the nice Russia of the future, besides of the speech, ironical speech by Morozov. But we didn't avoid to discuss the nice order of the past, to which we come back. But out of the explanation of Andreas, and I don't agree that war is unique. Of course, it's unique as every big war, but not less and not more. It's awful, but all the characteristics which were listed, they don't make it something special. But that's not the point. The point is that all this appeals to the decisions of the UN, to the international order. They base in the legal criticism. They think that if you have a good law or if you have a good order, so that automatically everything will work. No, it will not work. We should not look at Kant, who is 300 years old. We should look at Kant and Friedrich Ratzel. They are the modern ones.
And they describe the world order in better rationalist and geopolitical terms. And it's quite obvious from their description that you say that the state is the most important actor. Well, the size of the state, its nuclear potential, defines the rules that the state creates. It may be Russia, the Soviet Union, or the USA. And then you may continue to believe that somewhere there are more democratic rules, somewhere not, but there are two solutions. And that's why I believe we are at the dead end. We are discussing what will happen after Russian military defeat, but there won't be any military defeat. There won't be any return to the old world order. And I think that the Western countries are observing everything impassionately because they believe that the defeat of Ukraine will be the end, but it will be the beginning. So we need to understand how to limit the role of the state, or how we can create balances of different powers, counterbalances. So in my view, the problem is not, like Mr. Lagodinsky said, that someone will invade Narva. But the problem is that Article 5 is not efficient. It doesn't work. And if Russian military invades Narva and then gets back, there won't be any nuclear war. So there are a lot of research. NATO was created in the old logic. Now those principles ceased to work. Those principles can't be directly applied anymore. So we should think about changing the situation towards a more just world. So could you make a comment from Kant's point of view? Well, I can't agree that our discussion here is senseless. The dead end you observe, it's not a dead end, but it's a very long way, because we are looking in future. And the time for the Eastern Europe is very difficult. The war can be frozen, and different regimes may be created in countries next to Russia. So for the next years, we may face some dystopian situations. And for this, we should also think about normative side. Andreas, do you want to add something to what Mikhail said? Yes, I agree with Mikhail. I don't know what to do with this fatalist approach. Because, well, it means that we don't have any hope. Of course, I understand all the difficulties. And I think Russian history teaches us that we may have losses, and they lead to reforms, to new constitutions. And as a result, different big empires can fall, like Tsarist Empire. I don't know what will happen in future, but if we say that Russian army can't be defeated, what should Ukraine do? Should we give up the fight? What recommendations can we give based on this fatalistic approach? I think that, well, it's not about Ukraine, it's about state borders in general. It's not about liberal world order, but it's about traditional world order, about
мы говорим, чем про
Westphalia world system, not about UN or liberal UN system.
В этом и вся как бы надежда, я думаю, для Украины, что она просто является обычным государством, обычным членом вот ООН, и но она вот
UN
она сейчас
member state, a normal country,
сейчас терпит поражение от
it's
члена Совета
suffering
Безопасности, ядерной державы,
defeat
и тем самым как бы нарушается вся логика того, что было построено.
Nuclear power, destroying all the logic.
Ладно, это, наверное, опять же, скорее философский вопрос.
Well, it's a philosophical question. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andreas. And thank you to you for speaking to us from Kyiv. I would like to remind you one more time that this situation was organized together with the German Sakharov Society. So there is a break. We have a break, and we will meet